Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Game of Thrones podcast. I'm your host, Carmine of Red Team Review, and I'm joined here once again by the big man himself. He's back from his vacay, Mr. Preston Jacobs. Hello, sir.
How are you? How are you? You know, years ago when you said, when you kind of named this the Game of Thrones podcast, I was like, isn't that eventually going to get stale? But no, here we are. It's still Game of Thrones. Still Game of Thrones.
To
Game
be
of
fair,
Thrones.
it's technically the unofficial Game of Thrones podcast because back when we started this, HBO didn't have anything going down, and now they have in the recent years, and they call themselves the official Game of Thrones podcast. So I guess for legal purposes, we have to be the unofficial, but it's fine. It's fine. it's completely fine.
So we're back to talk about episodes 1 through 3. You already talked about episodes 1 and 2 with Explainer the Tray, and but you know, I was gone, so here we are. Here we are to get into all of this.
Here we are, yes. He's actually correct. Also, before I forget, guys, we're on SoundCloud, iTunes, all that good stuff, and please leave a comment down below, yada, 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 you know the drill. Okay, we got to get right into it because episodes 1 and 2, I think, just to knock this out of the way, episode 2, real quick, I put a tweet saying, if you didn't like episode 2, then you never really liked Game of Thrones in the first place, because episode 2 really encompasses what made Game of Thrones amazing. Those intimate moments between characters and like people acting like real people. I thought episode 2 was phenomenal.
I agree with you. I think episode 2 was the show at its finest. I think it was the best episode so far. And what's funny is it probably has the least number of things happening in it, because it's mostly just people in rooms, like having conversations, emoting, and us finding out more about characters. I think it's a very well put together episode, and I think it building up to the climax of the end with Aegon weeping over, you know, reasons that we don't know, you know, was just beautifully done. And I really think episode 2 was just a triumph. And it didn't have the mistakes. Like, you know, how there's the one thing that kind of plagues House of the Dragon is that every other episode has some really big, shocking mistake where everyone goes, I really like the episode, but then they did this. And episodes 1 and 3 have that. Episode 2 does not have that, which is why episode 2 is so good. I'm thinking of like season 1 as well, like episode 8. That's the Vaemond episode. That just it also doesn't have any shocking mistakes in it. And so you just kind of go, that's just a perfect episode. I mean, House of the Dragon, it takes these risks. It tries to have these red wedding moments to shock us, to have everybody talking around the water cooler. But those are the things that aren't landing. But if they really stick to what they're good at, the show is so good at direction, so good at characterization, just so good when you just put two people in a room. It's so compelling just to have them talk. You know, that's what I'm digging about the show, is just people talking, which is so funny, right?
And their conversations feel real. It feels like the characters aren't fucking stupid. I know I'm getting ahead of myself here, but like in episode 3, Simon Strong literally sits down with Daemon and they have a conversation. Simon's not dumb. He's very well aware, using what he knows about fucking real life, that Harrenhal is not a place that can catch on fire. The last time it caught on fire, his ancestor burned the whole place down. He knows that Larys is up to no good. He knows all this stuff. And I love how the conversation kind of gets meta when Daemon's like, the Brackens and the Blackwoods, why are they fighting? I mean, how much time you got for that explanation? It's like, it feels like meta.
Right, it's funny. And some people say it's because apparently the actor that played Simon Strong is a real, in UK, he's like real, like veteran actor. I'm bringing up his name is Simon Russell Beale, played Simon Strong, and apparently he's a real veteran actor. But the fact that like Daemon having a conversation with a absolute nobody, like character-wise, an absolute nobody, and is one of the most compelling scenes in the whole episode. It's really amazing. Because when you get two actors and you get good dialogue, man, like things like that's all you need. It's amazing.
And I find it crazy that people are like, this is boring. Bro, did you even watch the original?
Who's saying that?
Oh, Preston. There are so many people who thought episode 2 was... But I know you didn't do your Chad review of it, but oh my god, you have no idea how many people out here are saying...
Are these the people that think Andor was boring? Is that it?
It's probably the same people. I know I'm jumping all over the place, but we never got a chance to talk about episode 1. The major thing about episode 1 was, Rhaenyra, Emma Darcy had almost no lines the entire episode, but they still knocked it out of the park. And the other thing was
this is a son for a son.
A son for a son. You didn't like the wet bandits.
No, I mean, thinking back on that episode, you've got the wall stuff, which I was fine with. You've got Rhaenyra mourning, flying around, searching for Luke's body. Fine with that. A lot of introduction of new characters, with, for instance, Alan of Hull, and then of course he mentions his brother. I was fine with that meeting. They did it really well, and I mean, we both love Father, the actor that plays Alan of Hull is Father. I think we both love him.
Abubakar Salim.
Yeah, and then and so I was even fine with like the Massaria arrest, like stowaway plot and things like that. But and then the wet bandits come in. And it's a little weird. And, I watched the inside the episode about it and what their mindset was, that they were trying to turn it on its head by following these different perspectives and having different genres even. Like and because it's true that you start with Daemon's perspective and then you switch to the wet bandits perspective. And then we switch to Helena's perspective and you get this shift and it's kind of unexpected. And that's true, but unexpected doesn't mean you necessarily did it well. I think the problem with Blood and Cheese is that from their perspective, it's like there's weird moments where it's like they're in a horror movie. Like there's a scene where Blood like is all of a sudden frightened and scared because they come across the handmaiden. And then all of a sudden he looks back and the handmaiden's gone. It's like one of those disappearing, the reverse of a jump scare, as if it's a horror movie. Like, where did she go? But it's like, but no, they're the monsters. They're the ones that in literally a few seconds behead a little boy. Imagine watching a horror movie and Michael Myers is suddenly shocked by the fact that the person he was chasing like disappeared. Like it would just be off, right? Like they're the horror. Like, and so I think it was really a mistake putting it like from the Wet Bandits' perspective. Like it should have been from Helena or Allison's perspective. They're the ones feeling the horror and the fright with these two people coming in. And it was just one of those things that the Sophie's choice of it all, the gut-wrenching feeling that Helena would have, something that we're supposed to experience through her and understand why she goes crazy later and things like that. We're supposed to feel her pain, and we didn't get that. We got this weird bickering of two guys before, as they go into the castle. It didn't come off well. And it essentially ruined the episode. All the rest of the episode was pretty good. And then that ending, they really messed up. So I don't know. Do you feel differently?
I think the problem I have with that whole scene with Blood and Cheese is that we saw them go through the motions. We saw them make mistakes. We saw them bicker. Obviously, in the books, it's told as a third-hand account, and therefore, all these like tiny details really aren't there because the maesters are, telling us what they believed happened based off other accounts. Fine. But the fact that we get to see all this other detail really takes away the reputation they had in the books of being these, crazy psycho killers who snuck in the Red Keep. The best way to describe it would be like, imagine if the Red Wedding, you saw all the planning happening. You saw all the Freys come together and they're like, okay, what music should we play right before we do it? And what's the code word for when we attack Robb and his family? Do we go like 3, 2, 1 and then go, or do we do it on 1? Like, how do we do it? If we saw scenes like that leading up to the Red Wedding, it wouldn't feel as dreadful. It wouldn't feel as impactful as it did. It wouldn't feel as insane as it was. And that's the issue here with Blood and Cheese, I think, at the end of the day. You saw these guys being bumbling idiots instead of, like, all of a sudden appearing like they should have. Seeing them be silly and ridiculous took away from a lot of it, I think.
But, you know, even with you're right about the Red Wedding and why the Red Wedding was so good, both written and on film, in the show. And you're right that certain things aren't shown, and that's good because certain things shouldn't be shown. But I think also what House of the Dragon gets wrong about having Red Wedding moments is that the thing about the Red Wedding is it's shocking, but it's also the most obvious and, like, right there the whole fucking time, of course that happened, like, thing. Like, no one steps back and goes, why on earth did they do the Red Wedding? That didn't make any sense. No, it makes complete sense. And it was foreshadowed, like, all through the first and second books and in the first, second seasons. It makes so much sense. Catelyn's like, don't cross Walder Frey. You know, like, this is what would happen if you don't try to break a betrothal. These are really important in our society. And then he breaks the betrothal. And of course that happens. Of course that fucking happens. It's like the perfect irony of it all is, and I don't mean irony like, irony has a couple definitions. There's irony as in, like, you know, sarcastic or something fittingly happens. But in a dramatic sense, there is this, like, when something unexpected happens that's even more even more fitting. I guess it is more like the irony I just explained the second one, but, like, unexpectedly fitting. And that's the Red Wedding, unexpectedly fitting. Like, it still feels unexpected, but it's so logical in the end when you actually examine it. And with House of the Dragon stuff, it's not the same. Like, Daemon going God mode in battle, like, is shocking, but it's not expected. Like, no one's like, why would has anything that we've seen of Daemon shown us that he can fight 300 men at once and, like, dodge a million arrows? Like, no. Like, has anything we've seen, like, justify why Kristen Cole would get away with beating a man to death in the middle of a wedding? No. Like, has anything we've seen so far justified the ability for Rhaenyra and Daemon to kill a man and then swap his bodies with Laenor and then burn the body and try to get, like, pass it off as Laenor? No. Has anything we've seen had a dragon busting through a floor? Like, you know, like, none of those things fit. None of those things you go, well, of course that's gonna happen. No, like, they're just out of nowhere. They're just out of nowhere, and people are left scratching their heads. So they're not like Red Wedding moments or Purple Wedding moments or the things that are so shocking in A Song of Ice and Fire, Game of Thrones, you know, the first few seasons of Game of Thrones. So, I mean, and I do, people always bash me. They're like, oh, why does Preston spend so much time complaining about stuff? And it's like, well, you know, it's like, I'm sorry that the negative stuff, like just gets more attention than the positive stuff. But because I do fundamentally, like, I think it's still a pretty good show, and episode 2 is masterful. But I really wish they would stop at these illogical, like, shock moments where they're trying to, like, have people have a conversation around the water cooler, but it comes off as just, like, odd and jarring and out of place and desperate. I don't know. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, because if we're talking about stuff towards the end of the episode that kind of fucks with it, in episode 3, That was the septa stuff. Do you want to get into that, or do you want to discuss a good chunk of the episode first?
Well, let's get through. I mean, do you have anything else on episode 1 or episode 2 that you'd like to talk about first before we get to episode 3? I mean, episode 3 is the fresh one, so everyone wants to hear about that more. But I was just wondering if there's anything else in episode 2 that you wanted to talk about.
No, I think I've said everything I had to say for episodes 1 and 2. Me and Trey pretty much covered everything. I've already discussed the whole blood and cheese thing ad nauseum. Ryan Condal, I don't know if you saw, me and Trey came back to, discuss Ryan Condal's response to blood and cheese. And basically he was saying how legally they could not do what they wanted to do legally. They just couldn't do it. So, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a bunch of bull. I mean, yes, you can't do certain things legally, but when I think of, for instance, the original Halloween has no blood in it, not a single drop of blood, and it's one of the most suspenseful, mind fuck like scary movie you can have, and it's incredible. You can do horror without blood. You can do horror without gore. Like there's a psychology aspect to it that you can put on film. And the original Halloween is a perfect example of that. Like the shock of the scene is not necessarily the killing of a child. It's the forcing a woman to choose between her children and like the agony she would feel. And we just didn't get that. Because there's the distraction of the wet bandits and their incompetence, and I don't know, just how the scene was paced and everything.
Yeah, I get what you mean. It's just frustrating how the episode will be going along, everything will be all right and dandy, you know, just they're on a roll here, just don't fuck it up, and then every so often it's like, oh, why did you do that? That was unnecessary. We didn't need that. It's frustrating, really. At the end of the day, it's just frustrating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For
episode 3, I guess in typical Ryan Condal fashion, we got that again. But we'll get there. Most of the episode was fine. It wasn't bad. It was just the episode. It was the episode that needed to happen after 2. Nothing was going to follow up 2. I mean, that's wishful thinking. But I don't think it was bad. I thought it was just fine. I will say though, that opening with the Bracken Blackwood stuff, whew, very good.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'll talk about this a little in my Brandon Chad and Sweet Robin review, but I mean, it's a really well directed scene, really well acted scene. I do like the beginning, but that the point in which they're at that battle, you're like, how did you get from that conversation to that particular situation in battle? Is like there would be a crazy story to get to there. That's never shown, but it's because the Bracken is stabbed with his own sword and he's lying on top of the body of the Blackwood, which means they all like de-escalated that situation, went home, gathered their armies, and then came back and like fought again. I mean, it's so well directed. It's an incredible like switch, like getting from one scene to the next. But I was like, man, really wanted to see how they got there, because it's how did he get stabbed with his own sword? Who stabbed him? Like why is he on top of the Blackwood? Like like what happened? But
honestly, like it reminds me of that one scene from season 1 of Thrones where Tyrion's like, "Yeah, let's go," and one of the mountain clans' hammer hits him in the head and he misses the whole battle. It's a nice cheaper way to like have to avoid doing a big battle. I'm cool with it. I kind of like how they did that.
Yeah.
They brought that back.
It was it's very well directed, and you felt like in this short period of time that you knew that Bracken character, and then it's sad to see him dead. So I do think it was very well done. Even though I'm just like, how did they get from A to C? Like, what happened?
Over in King's Landing, we got Aegon hanging out with his bros. Kind of a weird, bad move for him to make his buddies the Kingsguard, but whatever.
Yeah, but it's weird. And maybe it's best we talk about this, because do you feel like all of the characters are acting different this season.
Yeah, this is something I keep saying in my episode reviews. It feels as though all the characters are vastly different than how they were in season 1, and I feel as though they got new writers to come in who watch season 1 and they're like, okay, this was dumb, let's change this up. One specific instance is Otto Hightower, who in the first season, he was on some level strategic. Now he seems to be more so. He's more politician here. And I like it. It's not something I hate. But Rhaenys said something specific this episode that made me feel that, yeah, they have different writers. At least a good chunk of the new people coming in were different writers, because Rhaenys says, yeah, this is not something Otto Hightower would sanction or would allow. That's not true. Last season, episode 9, during the Green Council, Otto tells the Lord Commander before he quits, hey, take your knights, make it quick, make it clean. People were saying well, he would never allow that specific strategy that Aegon used. Yeah, okay, fine, maybe he wouldn't send one guy, but he still wanted to send a series of people over there to still do the same thing.
An assassination, right? He specifically tried to do that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I mean, in episode 1 with Aegon, him hearing out the petitioners, he seems like a very chill guy. I kind of liked Aegon.
Right. If you ignore Aegon's horrible actions in season 1, and we're mainly thinking about his rape of the woman and him enjoying child fights, supposedly. I mean, we hear of this. If we ignore those two aspects of his personality, and then just see him this season, you're like, well, he just seems like a guy who wants to do good and is really upset now that his son was murdered, and everything seems kind of logical at this point. All of a sudden he doesn't seem that bad if we just go on season 2 and we ignore the horrible aspects of him from season 1. Yeah.
Well, like I said before, it's very clear these guys went back to the drawing board when it came to writing these characters. They saw our complaints from season 1, and they went and fixed some of that stuff up and made some other characters a bit more pronounced in what they're supposed to be. So I don't have an issue with it.
What's weird is you kind of like his bros. You like him and his bros, as which, I mean, he's very charming. He's a handsome, charismatic actor, and so even in his sad, pathetic, feeling bad about his daddy not loving him and feeling sad that his son was killed and insecure about his position of power that he never wanted, there's something weird and likable about him,
Did you notice this weird push to make him think that he's weak? He's literally been at the job for less than 2 weeks.
I know.
Huh? You are weak, Aegon. You are. He hasn't even done anything.
Right.
So
I know.
What is that? I guess it's to make it. They need a reason why Aegon gets on his dragon and just flies off to go do his thing. So I'll show them. Let's go, Sunfire.
Right, and you needed a reason to kick Otto off. And I admit the source material is bad. In that the source material just has Aegon independently be angry at Otto that things are taking too long, and that his emissary to the three sisters in Essos went too slow, and that it wouldn't be exciting to show months going by with nothing happening, which is the event in the source material that caused him to get rid of Otto, is the fact that Otto wasn't doing anything. He was being slow. That's not going to look good to screen. So you have to have Otto have a fuck up. You have to have Otto be tell Aegon that he's acting reckless. And you're he's acting reckless. Fucking Otto planned a coup and did that. Remember that scene first season where Otto was so happy that he had not sent anyone to greet Rhaenyra randomly, and he's yeah, she got punked, and you're he was completely unprofessional, or the fact that he complimented last season. He complimented Alicent for going fucking buck wild nuts and trying to stab Rhaenyra. Do you remember that?
it feels like a completely different character,
right?
It's ridiculous.
When Alicent literally tries to stab Rhaenyra, she gets a compliment from Otto. But when Aegon does the exact same thing, by sending a Cargyle twins to kill Rhaenyra, he's called reckless. So, man, you are right that Otto is completely inconsistent.
It's completely inconsistent. I know some people are going to go, that's not true. No, it is.
When Otto tried to order an assassination, it was okay. When Alicent tried to do an assassination herself, it was okay. When Aegon tries to send a Kingsguard, it's not a bad plan. It's a pretty good plan from Kristen Cole. I mean, they gave it to Kristen Cole in the source material. It's Aegon's plan, but it's a pretty good plan.
They needed a reason why Cole becomes Hand of the King. It's Cole taking it upon himself.
Because they gave Cole nothing to do first season. So why on earth would he all of a sudden be Hand? Well, he came up with a really good plan.
Harrenhal, briefly, I want to touch on this. They're giving Alice Rivers something to do with Daemon here.
I'm all for it. I'm all for Alice Rivers having something to do in the story. I'm all for anyone outside of King's Landing having more role in the story. I think the story is astoundingly small for what we're supposed to see. This is a kingdom-wide war, and the fact that the plot seems to revolve around the inner workings of these two families, and only these two families has always bothered me from the beginning. From the beginning, I thought this show should have had a northern plot and an Essos plot and an Old Town plot, and then you could hop between them. And so anything outside of King's Landing, Dragonstone, I'm happy about. But also there's some interesting ideas in there, because Alice Rivers is a character that just appears in the book when Aemond is there, and then promptly disappears. And the fact that she should be there when Daemon arrives and should have some effect on Daemon is logical to me. I'm all for Alice Rivers having an expanded role.
Well, according to her HBO bio, she's a healer in service to House Strong and Harrenhal, which kind of tracks with what the three sources in Fire and Blood say about her. I think Mushroom says she's like a witch with magical powers. I forgot if it was Gildane or Munkin or whoever else. Someone else says she's a woods witch, simple-minded. The other person says she's a healer. So I guess she's going to be a bit of all of that. And just so you know, head writer Sarah Hess has said that she is not a Melisandre clone, so don't expect any shadow babies. She will be fucking with Daemon's head. So, and we see that in this episode, where Daemon sees a vision of Rhaenyra, young Rhaenyra, not older Rhaenyra as she is now.
I know, right?
Younger Rhaenyra, huh?
Oh no, getting Millie back. But I'm all for that, and I trust. Sarah Hess was the main writer for episode 2, so I trust in Sarah Hess. So,
okay, so Dragonstone, Baela having something to do.
Yeah, the Baela stuff. Well, Rhaena is upset that she's getting sent to the Vale. And upset that she doesn't have a full grown dragon and isn't part of the war or something. They're bringing back Rhaena's insecurity. What does Baela do?
Baela is the headstrong one. I'm surprised Baela is getting more scenes here, but it's to be expected. She had some stuff with Rhaenys last season, but it was a deleted scene. And I figured they would send Rhaena away, because what else is the actress going to do? I also find it funny how the audience keeps confusing Baela and Rhaena, even though they don't really look alike. But in the books, they're twins, and I don't think in the show they're twins.
So in general, I think it's funny how we accept certain things in fiction that we don't accept in life very much. Some people, the whole anti-SJW crew, every time a woman beats up a man, they get all upset because they're like, oh gosh, it takes me out of it because that wouldn't happen in real life. You're like, okay, but how often do you see a person taking on one person defeating 2 people in a fight, or one person defeating 5 people in a fight? That's completely unrealistic, and it doesn't take you out of it. People with perfect teeth on screen. Like in the Middle Ages, people had horrible teeth, but everyone on screen has perfect teeth and they're all supermodels. You know, they're all really attractive. Like, does that take you out of it? One of the other things that I always think is funny is that in real life, siblings look alike. Like, you know, and children look like parents. But on TV, you've got these siblings and parents that look nothing alike.
Yeah.
And we just accept it. We just accept it. So much so that I think in real life, when you meet somebody's sibling and you're like, oh my God, you look so much like each other. It's like, yeah, we're brothers. Of course we look fucking alike, you know, like, but we accept it with fiction that people that are in the same family look completely different. And we just like take it. You know, just like, yeah, no, that's fine. Let's move on. You know, and it doesn't take us out of it. You know, so Rhaenyra and Baela look nothing alike. They look completely like from completely different families. There's no similarity between them other than them both being black. But like, they look nothing alike.
People in my comment section keeps confusing them because it's the names. It's the Targaryen names.
It's the names, and everybody has the same names in this show. So considering there's a Rhaena and a Rhaenys and a Rhaenyra, you know, and you're like, okay. And so
the one thing I'm surprised that not a lot of people are really going into and talking about is Ryan Condal's incessant need to be like the Star Wars prequels, to where they have to remind us that this is a prequel to Game of Thrones. What I mean by that is, I remember watching a documentary on episode 3. The final fight between Obi-Wan and Anakin took a lot of manpower and hours to build the set, do the choreography, all that stuff. Yeah. And as they were filming that final scene where Obi-Wan is about to walk away from Anakin, one of the producers had to remind George Lucas, you should probably have Obi-Wan pick up Anakin's lightsaber, because remember, in the future, he gives it to Luke. And we had a moment like that here, in this episode, with Daenerys' dragon eggs. And it's confirmed by the episode's director that when Rhaena is leaving for the Vale, those eggs in the carriage are Daenerys' dragon eggs. Now, there's 4 in there, you know, but you did have the cream-colored one, the green, and the crimson one, which are Daenerys'. The other blue, I guess, will be hatched later on. But for the most part, yeah, those are Daenerys' dragon eggs. We don't need to see that. I personally,
completely unnecessary.
Very unnecessary.
And what name do you go by? Han. I'm all alone. Han Solo. Like, it's like an origin story of something that didn't need an origin story.
We didn't need an origin story for it. The original origin story was actually better because
the Alyssa Farman
thing. Like, I put up a tweet about it, like how in the original story.
But I also think it's unnecessary. It was unnecessary in Fire and Blood.
You really think it was necessary? Because
I think it was unnecessary. Like, there's a million because you know, prior to Fire and Blood, people were speculating about the missing dragon egg from the Mystery Knight, because we never find out what happens to that egg, and you're like, oh, was that one of Daenerys' eggs? Well, we don't know, you know, like, but it's unnecessary, you know. Maybe they're just 3 random dragon eggs that really were from a shy. Maybe they were, you know, 3 random. You know, it's when George originally wrote it. Originally, George wrote that Daenerys finds the 3 eggs in the wilderness in the Dothraki.
In a cave, yeah.
Yeah. And so all of this like origin of these eggs dating back to these previous kings or something and tracking them is just, it's irrelevant stuff. I mean, it's not what he had planned. He had planned. Originally.
And that's why I'm saying this is unnecessary, because first off, we know this is the prequel to Game of Thrones. We know that very well. It's been very well documented how HBO has pushed this as 100 and some odd years before Daenerys Targaryen. Like, we know, we get it. And I was okay with the dagger stuff and the prophecy in the first episode of season 1, because I feel as though that came from George, kinda, which, okay, fine. If it was in George's original works or his original ideas, then I'm completely okay with that. But we don't need any other member berries, because that's really what these are. Like, they don't really serve much of a purpose other than for you to go, remember this? Because Red Letter Media always talks about this. In the original Star Wars, it was a throwaway line about Obi-Wan and Anakin in the Clone Wars, and Luke asks about it. Like, you and my father fought in the Clone Wars? And so when George Lucas came back to the prequels, they had to do the Clone Wars because it was a throwaway line. You don't have to show us Daenerys's dragon eggs. We like it's fine. It's completely fine. You don't have to do this. I don't know why it bothers me as much as it does, because it really just is like member berries.
We're well into the middle of the second season. Like, we don't need any hooks, you know? We don't need any hooks to bring us in. Be like, well, wait, why should I be invested in this? Well, you should be invested in this because it's Game of Thrones and it connects to the other series. Like, at this point, everyone watching, like, we have no fresh viewers at this point. No one's joining in at episode 3, season 2, and being like, why should I be invested? Oh, right, the eggs. Like, no, just forget it.
I will give it this. I wouldn't mind if it was a scene where it's a blink and you'll miss thing. Like, for example, because we were talking about the Red Wedding earlier. For example, did you know that you can actually, if you pause it at the right second for season 3, you can actually see very early in season 3, Tywin was speaking with Roose Bolton. And Roose Bolton, when he is in Harrenhal in season 3, you can see him, like, reading the letter that Tywin sent to him. And you can see the lion wax seal. It's a blink and you'll miss it moment. Like a split-second scene. I wouldn't mind something like that. But to, like, focus on it as much as they did, and for the director to come out and do, like, some weird article interview on it, I hate when the directors talk about it. Like, let us take it in first, and then maybe talk about it later in the future. But, like, right after the episode, nah, dude, let us absorb it first. You know, let the super sleuths on YouTube do their jobs. Because
also all the dragon stuff, like, we know that the dragon stuff is all a red herring. Like, the dragons are irrelevant. Like, the dragons aren't used to defeat the others at all. Like, it's all about the dagger. I mean, I guess the dragon needs to be given over to the Night King to use it to burn down the wall so he can walk through to the weirwood to get stabbed. But, like, that's it.
So the other,
I love it. Like those moments where Carmine just gets frustrated. It's just like, let's move on.
It's whatever. It was a whatever. I don't think it was bad. We've seen bad episodes. This wasn't bad, but it's just
no. This wasn't a bad episode. No, but it's just weird. Yeah, this episode.
I know people are probably going to say that's such a weird small little thing to hyper focus on, and you're right, it is. And I'll explain to you real quick before we move on. The issue I have is that in the first episode of season 1, when the dagger and the prophecy comes down, it's like a nice little way to connect it to Game of Thrones. Okay, that's fine, and it feels like it's from George. Okay, cool. We don't need any more reminding that this is the Game of Thrones prequel. You're right. They're like, we have the hook. It's already here. This should stand on its own. We don't need those reminders that this is the prequel to one of the best series of all time if the last few seasons didn't happen. Because that just annoys me. So that's where I'm coming from. You know, like, we don't need it. It's unnecessary. Let House of the Dragon have its own mythology, its own characters, its own thing. Let it stand on its own. We don't need any bait and hook. It's okay. Just let it go. Do your own thing. Because member berries only work when you remember the other thing fondly, and there is no fond memories of those last few seasons, which kind of fucks up the entire series. Because whenever you rewatch Game of Thrones, you restart it, and you're like, this is great, and then that feeling of dread comes over you, knowing exactly how it ends. And speaking of things that were unnecessary, that final scene between Rhaenyra and Alicent, I'm pretty sure we talked about this on stream, where I'm going to bring it up here. This is unnecessary simply because Rhaenyra and Alicent didn't need a meeting right now, because they're going to have one later. I apologize to the casual viewers for the spoiler, but there is going to be a point in the story where Rhaenyra does come back to King's Landing in an official capacity, and at that point, she and Alicent will obviously have conversations. This scene could have been had then instead of now. It really just was unnecessary.
I agree. I mean, look, I get that this show is about these two women. Like, it's about Alicent and Rhaenyra. They're the main characters. But I kind of felt like you could have a better story building up their tension apart, building up to the point where they finally meet. And I just think they've met too quickly now already in episode 3. I'm reminded of a similar show called Killing Eve. Killing Eve is a cat and mouse story where Sandra Oh is trying to find this crazy killer in Europe, and they, you know, it's this building up of like, again, cat and mouse, but then they end up like randomly meeting each other several times in increasingly improbable situations where you're just like, why isn't the one person trying to kill the other? Like, and to talk, because they don't know what else to do with them. And it just kind of, to me, it took the wind out of the sails. Like, just let the build up, let things build up until they finally meet. Like, they don't have to, they don't have to confront each other now. So if you wanted to do it once a season, maybe have it at the end of the season, or just keep building until Rhaenyra takes King's Landing, which I think is more interesting. But here they blew it. They blew their load, like episode 3. Like, already you have a confrontation between Rhaenyra and Alicent.
What's equally as annoying is that this is Ryan Condal wanting to... Because Rhaenyra has been frustrating this entire season, and that's by design. She's being hesitant, and people are getting, like, annoyed with her. Her counselors are like, come on, what are you doing? Unleash the dragons. And she's being very hesitant. Yeah. She understands that, like, look, if we unleash dragons on dragons, this could end badly for everyone, and there's that threat in the north. We need to, like, I can't commit all of this power just yet until I'm 110% sure there's no other way forward. Okay, fine. It's Ryan Condal trying to be smart about it. It's also Ryan Condal trying to make Rhaenyra not the warmonger that she is in the source material. Okay, fine. But he's bending backwards a little too much to try to do that. Like, I get it. Rhaenyra is the good guy, and she's trying super hard to avoid what we saw in the first scene with the Brackens and Blackwoods. But come on, dude. Like, there could have been a better way to keep these women on the payroll. Like, you didn't have to do that scene.
Yeah, it's odd because let's talk about thematically what this whole story is supposed to be about, right? This episode was called Burning Mill. And even though the Burning Mill is a very minor part in the beginning of the episode, the theme of Burning Mill should exist through the whole episode, right? Just as Son for a Son, that theme should go through the whole episode. And we start with this Hatfield versus McCoy, like, back and forth hatred between the Blackwoods and the Brackens. And this is supposed to be a cautionary tale. Like, when these two like ongoing rivalries that burn and burn continue on, it just escalates, and in the end, everybody dies, and it's horrible, right? So that cautionary tale of the Burning Mill is supposed to be projected onto the Greens and the Blacks. But it's not really projected like that. The story so far is Three's Company misunderstanding after Three's Company misunderstanding after another Three's Company misunderstanding. Like, the sides don't really hate each other that much. It's just a whole bunch of misunderstandings and mistakes. That, like,
it kind of removes some of the impact, because, like, every major story beat is a mistake, like, oh, Aemon, he didn't mean to kill Luke, whoops. Oh, well, Daemon's assassins, like, Daemon didn't mean for the assassins to kill a little boy, whoops. It's like everything's a whoopsie moment.
Whoops. Right. You're starting out with, like, whoopsie the eye, and then whoopsie the I heard Viserys wrong, like, whoopsie, Luke gets killed, Aemon didn't mean it, and then whoopsie, I was trying to kill Aemon back, and instead we ended up killing Jaehaerys. Like, everything is just whoopsie, rather than the building Hatfield and McCoy hatred of how easy, like, it's no longer a cautionary tale for humanity. It's no longer a tale like, this is what happens when you let bitterness and revenge, like, consume you. Instead, the story is, watch out for those whoopsies. Like, it's not, that's, so, it's settling with me a little weird, because these characters should be having increased vengeance, but the showrunners clearly want us to like Alicent and Rhaenyra. So this tale of vengeance is not a tale of vengeance anymore. It's just a tale of mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, if they really wanted us to like Alicent, they probably shouldn't have paired her with Kristen Cole having sex scenes, because both episodes ended with a Kristen Cole Alicent sex scene, and everyone's just like, really? Why? Why are we doing this? Is this necessary?
It's totally necessary, man. Totally necessary. We've gotta have some sex in this show. I mean, Aemon's not even having sex. He's just getting held like Jesus. That's all that's happening. He's just getting held like Jesus. So somebody put it on my stream. I was talking about that scene and how I was just like, they have this imagery of Mary holding Jesus, but it's like, does it really apply? How is Aemond like Jesus? Like, Aemond is not innocent. Aemond is not unjustly targeted. He's a very sinful man, a very filled with hatred kind of man. He is nothing like Jesus. How does this relate? And somebody just said, you're thinking about it too much. It's just that, like, she's holding him like a mother holds a child. And that's like Mary holding Jesus is just a mother holding a child. The themes is mothers. And I was like, I guess on a really simple level, but it's just, that's what's like the simplicity of the mother theme that not just Game of Thrones goes to, but like, it seems like all fantasy sci-fi goes to this like simplicity of mothers aspect, which I'm just kind of like done with. Like, women have more to say than just being like the mother role. It's like I think they're trying to make Rhaenyra and Alicent the peacemakers because they're the mothers of the show, and just like they tried to like make Cersei likable by having her be the mother of be a mother, or Catelyn be a mother. Like, everything they do is because of motherliness.
Mm-hmm.
They're trying to hold back the war because of motherliness. And it's like, and like I say, like, sci-fi in general tends to just pigeonhole women into this like mother narrative, whether it be Aliens or Terminator. Like, it's just like, have them be something else. Like, they can be mothers on the side, but have them have characters outside of just being mothers. But that's just one of my other like weird rants, how just like no one can see women other than being baby makers in these, and how they act and react to being baby makers in these shows, in these sci-fi fantasy shows, when they can be doing other things. Like Helena, like, what character like attribute to Helena do we know?
I'm not touching on that, because there was something you said in the stream which, because the whole thing about Helena is that she may be coded as autistic. Has that been confirmed by Ryan Condal, or are you correct about the fandom just putting that on her?
I haven't seen, I mean, again, people can correct me if I'm wrong. I have not seen anyone in show claiming that they made her autistic. And I know people use this term coded, which essentially means you're taking you're hiding the intention. You're saying that, like, I'm receiving this information as coded. Therefore, it's the showrunner's intention, but it's passive voice when you say coded. Like, we don't know who's doing it. So do we really know that they tried to make Helena autistic? And I'd say the later Helena doesn't act that way at all. Like, the things that we associate, like, say, take young Helena, the one that was like crushing the spider and being kind of nuts. Like, she didn't want to be touched by her mother, and she wouldn't look characters in the eye. Okay. And you're like, okay. And people kind of took those aspects and saying, well, look, she's clearly autistic. And then we have later Helena, who does look people in the eyes and who does touch people. So there's no consistency between the young Helena character and the old Helena character. And maybe it was that young Helena made a choice, just like the actresses for young Rhaenyra and young Alicent had made the choice that those characters had a lesbian thing for each other, and they didn't even communicate. They didn't communicate it to Emma Darcy and and Olivia Cook. And so you don't have that same sexual tension that young Rhaenyra and Alicent had for each other in old Alicent and Rhaenyra, because it wasn't right. Communicated. It may be that the younger actress made a choice that the older actress did not hear about or did not follow through on or something. But it's a little weird. Like, she receives visions. The reason she acts funny is because she receives visions. You know, so the code, like the whole idea of her being coded as autistic doesn't make any sense to me, because now you're saying, well, what's the cause for her acting funny? Oh, is it not the visions? Is it autism? Or is it the visions? Like, you know, or are they just randomly both causing her to act funny, you know? But I think the fandom's gone a bit far on the Helena is autistic thing, but maybe somebody can prove me wrong and find a writer that said, yes, we totally did that. But
these writers love coming out of the fucking blue at the end of every episode, and like loves to tell you their intentions instead of you like absorbing the intention and like, you know, sitting on it.
Right.
So.
And then often we find that their intentions completely contradict each other, and you're like, well, which was it? Like first season, like why Daemon stormed out of the brothel. We had 3 different people explaining that scene from the showrunners. And you're like, oh, so you had no plan. Like the writer and the director and the actors all thought something completely different. And Daemon storms out. Like one was like, oh, he couldn't get it up. Or one was like, he didn't have power over Rhaenyra. So the situation didn't interest him anymore. Or this was something he morally thought was like not right at the time. Like I heard all of these explanations from the showrunners, and they're just all kind of contradicting each other. I think it's probably the same with when you've got a room full of writers all writing, they might have different ideas about where the characters are going.
Well, like I said, episode 3, for what it is, it's one of the episodes of all time. It's an episode that's there. It's supposed to bridge us.
Look. I'm gonna say there's some fucking fantastically acted scenes in Harrenhal and with the burning mill, and I was really enjoying Aegon and his bros, and I'm for all that. It's just it lost its step with the disguised as a septa plot. It's just it seems like a very unusually risky thing to do, and weird thing to do.
I think what I'm afraid of the most is that Ryan Condal is going to end up like Dave and Dan, in the sense where Dave and Dan just had like these weird decisions that were so like out of left field in the later seasons. For example, there's a Simpson episode where Lenny and the other Homer's other coworkers are watching him, waiting for him to do something stupid. And Lenny even says, okay, everybody, get ready. He's gonna do something stupid. And then Homer turns his chair around and says, that's not gonna happen. Then turns his chair back around and spills fondue all over the nuclear codes. I'm afraid that that's what Ryan Condal is becoming. Like, everything will be fine and dandy, and then he'll have like this weird idea to insert something in here, and it just becomes like unnecessary stupidity. Because towards the end of their run on Game of Thrones, what was Dave and Dan's nickname?
Dumb and Dumber, yeah.
I kind of hate that, because Ryan Condal has done some good job. He's clearly a fan. It's just, you're right. It like these, excuse me, these outrageous moments just to be water cooler conversations, they're unnecessary, man. Like, you don't need to do that.
No. I guess it's just that they want something shocking every episode. But
every episode.
Like, how many did Game of Thrones have? Game of Thrones usually had shocking things, like 1 or 2 super shocking things a season, right? Or was it every episode?
Game of Thrones, I can recall very vividly that Game of Thrones Season 1 didn't have something shocking at the end of every episode. They had cliffhanger
cliffhangers.
Like episode
like
one,
Littlefinger holding the knife to Ned's head.
Yep.
Or like Ned losing his head.
Or Ned losing his head. Episode 1, Bran falls out. Episode 2, Bran wakes up. The only episode I think didn't have like a cliffhanger moment was maybe 2 of them. Episode 3, where Ned is watching Arya train and he can hear the sounds of like war and like in his head. And there's another episode, I think it ends with Sansa begging for mercy for her father. That's it. But all the other episodes end on a nice cliffhanger.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that we don't have those events. Like, clearly Jaehaerys, like, dying would have been shocking enough by itself. The blood and cheese would have, that's built in for that shocking moment. You didn't need to make it more shocking. But I'm trying to think, like, what would have been the natural ending to episode 3 rather than the Sept incident, you know? And you could have had, I don't know. You could put Rhaenyra on a dragon and have her do something, do something crazy. Like, rather than have Baela chasing people, and they could have had Rhaenyra chasing people or something, giving her something to do. Because I know that they're trying to give Rhaenyra something to do, but they want to give her something to do while not making her a warmonger. And so, like, what do you, in the middle of a war?
Personally, I think they had the perfect way to end it with something happening with Daemon while he's having this vision or hallucination with Alice Rivers. That was creepy. That was a fine way to end the whole episode.
I think they could have ended on that vision and had it been a good, like, cliffhanger moment. But, they haven't even been doing the cliffhangers so well. Like, like Alicent and Cole having sex again isn't really
it's not a cliffhanger.
It's not a cliffhanger moment.
Me hate
they already had sex last episode,
I said how I'm thankful for the guy in the writer's room who had to convince Condal and Sarah Hess not to end the episode on another sex scene. Thank you, guy.
It's like he's like, wait, but we end every episode with a sex scene. No, not, but like, see, that would have been it, right? Like, oh my God. How about this ending if you wanted super shocking, okay? She sneaks into the Sept to find Alicent, but rather than finding her praying, she's getting fucked by Kristen Cole. Right? Wouldn't that have been more shocking and unexpected? And then she's like, going home. Like she was gonna try to make peace, but instead she found Alicent fucking Kristen Cole in the Sept and was like, wah, 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 back on their ship.
Kristen Cole somehow found a way to, like, escape the forest. Even though he told everyone to stay put, he ran all the way back to King's Landing just to fuck Alicent, then ran all the way back.
Would have been a little more shocking, I do wonder how important they're going to make Kristen Cole to Rhaenyra, because in the source material, clearly Kristen Cole is obsessed with Rhaenyra and is doing everything because he's bitter about Rhaenyra. But it's kind of funny if Rhaenyra does not give a fuck. Like, who's Kristen Cole? Like, I do not give a fuck. And like, because in the source material, Kristen Cole goes off to war and dies, and there is no reaction from anyone. Like, everyone's just like, yeah, okay, Kristen Cole's dead. And Rhaenyra has no comment. Like, his life, like, he was this bitter person obsessed with Rhaenyra, and Rhaenyra was not obsessed with him. She did not care. Like, so we'll see if they do that. I think they did mention, like, there is a moment where they mention Kristen Cole's name to Rhaenyra in the episode, but I don't know if she has too much reaction.
Oh, Baela, Rhaenyra's like, how are you certain? I'm pretty certain. Baela says, I'm pretty certain. I wasn't from that far up. So and Rhaenyra, I think Rhaenyra was more concerned that Baela was, like, doing her own thing instead of, like, So I don't think Rhaenyra gives a fuck about Cole. Honestly, that could have been one of the many conversations Rhaenyra and Alicent could have had next season when she takes King's Landing. Them talking now was just unnecessary. It just wasn't.
Yeah, I will grant that the tree cover thing with the dragons, I think that was a pretty clever way to kind of depower the dragons. Because one thing, we've got these dragons and they have so much power, but if they're under tree cover, that would be a way to, like, hide from them. I was expecting Baela to, like, light up some of the forest, but at this point they've scattered, so they're not catching anybody, or something. But she didn't light up the forest. She was just like, whatever. Like, I expected, like, the napalm scene of, like, her, like, trying to take him out, but she didn't. But nonetheless, I think it was a clever use of trees as a depowering aspect to dragons. Like, yeah, she's not going to be able to see where they are, So I say bravo there on a scene that was trying to give Bela something to do.
always moments to like, but then get overshadowed by stupid shit.
Yeah.
Preston, do you mind if we wrap it up here?
Sounds good.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. As always, we'll see you all next time. Have a good one.